Yes.
Fantastic. Okay. So over the course of this next week, I would like to invite you all to use and take advantage of this space, not simply for learning, but also for us to co-create a space of inquiry, courage, and most of all, collective vision for all of us. For those who don't know, my name is Amani Al-Khatatba, and I'm the founder of Muslim Girl. Muslim Girl is the largest media platform for Muslim women's voices in America, and I'm also an author and a commentator dedicated to redefining the narratives of Muslim women globally. My book, Muslim Girl: A Coming of Age, details the impact of Islamophobia on young women growing up in Western countries, much like my experience. And my work has focused on the intersections of gender identity, media, and power, and for us to carve out spaces for our stories to be told on our own terms. And over the course of the past decade that we have spent pushing back against media misrepresentation and the silencing of Muslim women, I'm sure many of you might share this experience. I have been told many times by trolls online, by critics, by detractors, by conservatives, that the word Muslim feminist is a contradiction, and that it simply doesn't exist. And if anything, the credit to me being a Muslim feminist comes from my upbringing in Western society. And to that, I say that I've actually always believed that the term Muslim feminist is an oxymoron, because to be Muslim is inherently to be feminist, to believe in the principles of gender equality and women's empowerment as was called upon us by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so as we enter into this space, we will be journeying together through the many facets of Islamic feminism, the roots and the future of Islamic feminism. We'll be reinterpreting sacred texts, confronting global structures of power, and most excitingly, we're going to be joined by some very extraordinary scholars who have each pushed the boundaries of our understanding of Islamic feminism in today's world. And I am quite excited and humbled to be joined by some exceptional voices here and to be starting at the very beginning today by tracing the history of Islamic feminism. And we have none other than Dr. Miriam Cooke, who will be guiding us in this lecture. And for those who don't know, Dr. Miriam Cooke is a pioneering scholar. Her work has profoundly shaped the discourse around Muslim women's agency, Islamic feminism as a global movement. And she is a professor of Middle Eastern Studies at Duke University. She has done some exemplary, groundbreaking scholarship on Arab women writers, on war and memory, on the intersections of gender and modernity in the Muslim world. And there's really no better person for us to have really kicking off this program with us. Dr. Miriam Cooke, I think you don't need me to say it, that you have been such a crucial voice in the framing of Islamic feminism. And you yourself have made sure to emphasize that this is not a Western import or a Western imposed ideology, but a very dynamic and transnational movement, and one that is also locally rooted as well. So I would like to invite you to open up our series today, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Amani, for that lovely introduction. And it is a pleasure to be with all of you. I will give, I don't know, maybe a 40-minute presentation, something like that. But look forward to the questions. That's always where I learn the most. So thank you so much. Yeah, so as Amani says, I'm going to try and give a short history of 1,500 years. Okay, so just to prepare you and see if it does fit into 40 minutes. So as Amani said in introducing me, one thing that I think is absolutely crucial for us to be aware of throughout this week, but in general, of course, is that Islamic feminism is a crucial term. So I've been publishing for about 40 years, and there has been so much pushback against feminism. Feminism as a Western term, and of course, in countries that were colonized by the British and the French, the term feminism had a lot to do with how the colonizers came in to these countries, and we're talking primarily Muslim countries. And to use Gayatri Spivak's famous term, they came in with an agenda to save brown women from brown men, so white men. But what we have seen since the Taliban in 1996, that white women joined the white men to save brown women from brown men. So yes, the term is one that has colonial baggage, but I think it is so important to remember that feminism as an ideology, as an epistemology, is universal. Women anywhere, everywhere, are aware of being oppressed when they are, not all are. And they are aware of the fact that they have to do something about it. So it's not Western. Now, the other term that I have been very careful to identify in my book, Women Claim Islam, which came out in 2000, is that Islamic, in the Islamic feminism, is very different from Muslim feminism. So, Amani, you talked about Muslim feminists, and in my book, I make a distinction between Muslim and Islamic because Muslim is just an identity that you're born with, that you may or may not feel very strongly about in the way that many Christians don't feel very strongly about the fact that they were born Christian, but they don't really care too much. Okay, it's something I'll put down on, customs forms, but I don't believe in Jesus or God. And so for me, Muslim feminism has to be separated from Islamic feminism because Islamic feminism is not a coherent fixed identity. And this is something, again, that I argued in Women Claim Islam, that we have to think about Islamic feminism as a contingent speaking position. In other words, contingent, when I'm talking to you and I trust that you are on the same page with me, I talk in a particular way. But if I am talking to somebody who is trying to deprive me of my rights, I'm gonna speak differently, and it doesn't make me any the less Islamic feminist. But it means that I am careful about the way I speak when I'm talking to you. And I think we have a very interesting example of this in Zainab al-Ghazali's prison memoir. Zainab al-Ghazali, 20th century leader of what many people refer to as an Islamist women's movement. So she was very connected to Hassan al-Banna and the Ikhwan, the Muslim Brothers, but she was very careful that she would never be sucked into the men's movement. So she set up her own. So in her prison memoir that she introduces with a discussion of her marriage contract, and as we know in Islam, there is a contract in the way that there isn't in Christianity. And she puts her conditions. So her conditions are that now that she has divorced one man because he interfered in her relationship with God, she wanted to make sure that this second husband understood that she was going to do the same to him if he interfered in her relationship with God. So I've referred, and I wrote about Zayd al-Ghazali back in the 90s. I've referred to her Ayam min Hayati, or Days from My Life, that came out in 1977 as a kind of feminist manual. This is the way you deal from within a conservative movement, how you deal with men. So I say contingent speaking position because she is one person in Days from My Life, and she's a very different person writing in her tafsir. So in her interpretation of the Quran, she is absolutely traditional. She follows Tabari to the nth degree. Anything that we consider to be, in general, are considered to be maybe problematic verses for women, the beating if women are disobedient, marrying as up to 4 women, all the things that we're familiar with that people have, and particularly Islamic feminists, have considered to be misogynistic. They're there. They're there, and it's, from the 9th century, her tafsir is no different from Tabari's. So Islamic feminism, I write, is, and I'm saying today, is a commitment to questioning misogynist Islamic epistemology, not just for oneself, but on behalf of all Muslim women. And this is crucial for me, that this is not a questioning of one's own faith position, but rather an expansion of it. And you'll see in what I say now how that happened, how that works. Okay, sorry, your beautiful faces are blocking my text. Good. So an example of Islamic feminism that was in the 1990s was still Muslim. I mean, not everybody agrees with me on Islamic feminism, even though the term has become very common. So Mahnaza Afkhami and her co-editors of the Sisterhood is Global Institute, in their statement that has shaped their platform, they write, the most important feature of contemporary Muslim women's struggle for rights is that they reject the proposition that they cannot be both free and equal with men and good Muslims at the same time. They insist that a woman becomes an authentic Muslim only when she has achieved freedom and equality as an individual and a citizen. A very concise but clear identification of the Islamic feminist position. And it is important also to note that there has been quite a lot of controversy over who has the right to use the term, either for oneself or for others. In the early 2000s, I was criticized, like, where did I come up with this term? And I hadn't. I mean, the term was already becoming fairly common by the 90s, but it was part of identity politics. You as a Christian woman, you're trying to foist your Western notion of feminism onto us. Things have changed, but I think it's important to note that there is still a measure of controversy around the term. Okay, I think I'm stuck. Okay, good. So in my opening remarks, I said, well, we're going to cover 1,500 years. So let's go back 1,500 years to what I call the roots of Islamic feminism in 7th century Arabia. And it is not only I, but many of the writers who I admire and who have written important works of Islamic feminist theory have referred to the Prophet Muhammad as an Islamic feminist revolutionary. And so there are many reasons, but I would say that if we were to look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we will see that some of the things that Muhammad said, or the words that were revealed to him through the angel Gabriel, could have been a pretext, an early text for the Declaration of Human Rights. So first of all, he gave women life. And by that, I mean he refused what is called in Arabic, wa'd banet, or female infanticide, which was a fairly common practice at the time. And I always need to add that babies, female fetuses are still being killed because they're not wanted as daughters. This was very common in China during the one-child policy. Muhammad, and through the Quran, but also in his own life, guaranteed property. Again, a universal right. And importantly, in terms of property, was not only the property that you have or whatever you earn as a woman, but also the right to inherit. And for those of you who know your history of women's rights in the West, women did not get the right to inherit until centuries after Muslim women had the right to inherit. And whether it's a half or a whole, I think is irrelevant. Thirdly, of course, back to our Declaration of Universal Human Rights, liberty, freedom. And the important verse that needs to be cited again and again is La ikrah fi din. So Quran 2, so Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 256, there's no coercion in religion. In other words, no one has the right to force you to do something in the name of religion. And finally, and this goes to a hadith, and I'm going to be using the term hadith, or I could use prophetic traditions, a very crucial prophetic tradition that is often used when women are demanding the right to education is you must seek knowledge, even if in China. And that is for everyone. It's not just for men. So what was the relationship of this, what I call Islamic feminist revolutionary in the 7th century? There are important seerahs, stories about his life, his own sayings, and that is, to start off with, his 3 favorite things in the entire world were perfume, which is why many of us love oud, prayer, and women. He said that paradise was under the feet of mothers. And there are 3 crucial women in the life of the Prophet. His 2 wives, he had others, but these 2 women are crucial, and his daughter. So Khadija, who had been his his boss, who proposed to him, was older than him, was the one to whom he reported what he had heard in the cave in Hira, and his terror that maybe it wasn't God, maybe it was the devil. Was he hearing things? And she assured him, no, that this was a revelation from God. And then Aisha, his youngest wife, so Khadija, his oldest, and Aisha, his youngest, who is often referred to as his favorite, crucial in the role that she played in making sure that what her husband, the Prophet Muhammad, said and did throughout her life with him was passed on. So there are over 2,000 prophetic traditions ascribed to her. And as I will say a little later in this talk, you will see the role she also played in correcting some of the companions. And thirdly, we have his daughter Fatima. And Fatima is said to have been at a meeting of the caliphs. They're referred to al-Khulafa al-Rashidun, or the rightly guided caliphs, who were the first four after Muhammad died. And according to Asya Jabbar in her book, Loin de Médine, or Far from Medina, Fatima was there while they were negotiating who was going to be the next leader of the young Muslim movement. And so she had a right to be there with the men. It was, as Asya Jabbar writes, really one of the earliest examples of democratic leadership. So the people were choosing. I mean, we don't know exactly who was choosing, but the people were choosing who they could really trust as taking over from Muhammad. And so Fatima's there. Asya Jabbar tells the story. She's there, and something comes up about the inheritance, and all these guys are, well, how should we divide up the inheritance? They're talking about dividing it up among the men. And she reminds them, my father's hardly cold in his grave, and you're already beginning to deny us our rights. So some of the issues that are considered to be Islamic, Islamic feminists have been pointing out now for the past 30, 35 years, are not Islamic. So gender segregation is not Islamic. In other words, it is an Islamic mandate for a very specific person or persons. So only twice is gender segregation connected to women. And one is for the Prophet's wives, so their privileged space of segregation for the most highly honored women, so the wives of the Messenger of God, or Ummahat al-Mu'minin, so the mothers of the believers. And then as Sahar Amar writes in What is the Veil, she says that the other reference to a space connected to women is for the Virgin Mary. So she goes into seclusion in the Quran when she learns of her virginal pregnancy. So as many Islamic feminist theorists have said, gender segregation is not Islamic. And a beautiful poem by my friend and colleague Moja Kaf. She writes a poem about my little mosque. And she writes in it, it's very long, and I'm sure you would enjoy reading it. In my little mosque, there's no room for me to pray. I am turned away faithfully 5 times a day. My little mosque, so meager in resources, yet so eager to turn away a woman. And Mahja is an Islamic feminist. So many have made the argument that if there is gender segregation, we have to think about who's choosing it. So if it is imposed by, as I mentioned before, by misogynistic authorities, people who say that they have the authority to control women's lives, if they are the ones that say women have to be in their own space and the mosque has to be divided and in half, or women should be in the basement, or they should be in another room, then it is oppressive. So gender segregation is oppressive if women don't choose it. But if they choose it, it can be empowering. So Leila Ahmed has written at length about the empowering space, women's spaces. And I think for those of us who are women and feminists, there are often times when we are more empowered in women's spaces for specific purposes, which has nothing to do with how we feel about men. It has something to do with how we feel empowered with each other. And so there's a wonderful film that I really recommend that you all watch. It's Moroccan Farida Ben Yazid's 1989 film, Bab Sama Maftuh. So in Arabic, it is The Gate of Heaven is Open, translated into English with subtitles, Door to the Sky. So briefly, it's a story of a young woman who's very hip, and she's in Paris, and she's got a boyfriend, and she drinks, and she gets a message from Fez in Morocco: your father's dying, you've got to come. So she comes, looking very punk, and her father dies. She inherits half the house with her brother, inheritance rights. And she decides she wants to buy her brother out, which is absolutely her right. And she has decided that this beautiful palace, which is right in the heart of Old Fez, is much too good for just her alone, that she should turn it into a women's shelter. And it's a beautiful film about how these women who have had no resources when they have been abused come there and find joy and peace. And more than anything, the peace that they get, the serenity that they get from that space is from the woman Quranic reciter. And you see that picture of them. So another no is the hijab, or the veil. So many have argued against it, and I will show you in a minute. But again, going back to Sadra Amar's work on what is the veil, she, like many others, but none, I think, as eloquently as Sahar does, says throughout that region, the veil was a marker of class. So we've heard many talk about the fact that the veil as a marker of class was what hit the Muslim armies as they started to move out of Arabia. So going east into the Sasanian Empire, and then going west, into the Byzantine. And in both of these empires, the veil was a marker of class. So we've known the role of the hijab, or the veil, from the 5th century, the 4th century in the region. But the argument that she makes is that this goes back 5,000 years. And then there are only 7 mentions in the Quran of the hijab, and never in terms of dress code. So the hijab, like a screen, and again, this is very much connected with the mothers of the faithful or the Prophet's wives. Many would sit behind this hijab when outsiders came in. And so there has been a big focus on the hijab as a patriarchal symbol of women's lack of choice to dress as they please and to control their bodies. And so I'll just mention 4. So in 1889, the Egyptian Aisha Taimuria, the matriarch of a very important literary family, wrote in her autobiography, "Perhaps I'm not qualified to speak in this sphere, and I admit to my limited powers of grasping the subject at hand. And why? Because I'm secluded by the tent of an enveloping wrap. Yet across its borders, I perceive that programs of education are treasure chests. We, the assemblage of females kept in seclusion, are more knowledgeable than you men, in the formation of the young." And that became a theme in the early 1920s. And that is, if a mother is not educated, how can she educate her sons? And if the mother is uneducated and from an upper class, and the likelihood of her son or sons being leaders, what kind of leaders are they going to be if at home they have an illiterate mother? The Egyptian Qasim Amin, who's become, I don't know, some people think unfairly famous, but his book, Tahrir al-Mar'a, The Liberation of Women, that came out in 1899, so just 10 years after Taimuria's autobiography, falls in with her argument, and talks about gender segregation and the veil as playing very, very negative roles in the lives of Muslim women. And then in 1923, we have the big explosion, and that is Huda Shahrawi, upper-class Egyptian woman, who founds the Egyptian Feminist Union and takes some of her cohort leaders of the union to an international conference in Rome. And it's there meeting up with women from all over the world who have become newly empowered. As you know, feminism was still young in the West, in Europe, and in America. And the discussions about women's rights became very inspirational for Huda. And so when she came back from Rome and arrived by train in the Cairo railway station, she decided that she would, so the covering then was, they covered the face. So it was a white face cover, not the eyes, but below. And because of who she was, her status, her class status, but also her political status as the founding director of the Egyptian Feminist Union, it was like a signal. It was a signal you have to unveil because it is not Islamic. It's a patriarchal symbol disempowering women. So a mere 4 years after Huda Sha'arawi and the wave of unveiling that cut across the world, went as far as Indonesia and to Europe, a group of sheikhs in Damascus issue a fatwa. And again, we have to remember that a fatwa is not a law. It is a legal opinion. So they issue in 1927 a fatwa condemning unveiling as a heresy. So up in the mountains above Beirut is a Druze feudal family, the Zainuddin family. Very, very important leaders in the Druze community. And at the time, Druze, particularly Druze like Nazir Zainuddin's father, who had trained in Istanbul as a judge, they were considered Islamic. So now we would say, well, you know, the Druze, it's very different. And in the 1932 census in Lebanon, the Druze are put as a separate confession and the fourth most numerous and therefore most powerful. But at the time, so we're thinking about 1928, this young woman has been studying Islam, particularly the Quran and the Hadith with her father, this judge who trained in Istanbul. And she's been giving some lectures because as a young woman, so she started lecturing when she was 17 and 18, trained by her father. She has enough material at hand with the lectures that she has given and writes like a mad woman when she hears this fatwa, and she publishes 400 pages. And it's called a Sufur wal Hijab, so unveiling and veiling. And in it, she goes through the ways in which the sheikhs from Damascus, who issue this very problematic fatwa, have distorted scripture. And she names them, she names the sheikhs. She does something also very interesting. She cites the Quran, but she doesn't cite surah and ayah, because she's assuming, because she's writing to the sheikhs and she's telling them, you don't know your Islam. At one point, she says, and that's later in her second book, she says, before you criticize me, read the Quran. So obviously very, very provocative. And there are many things that she talks about. And la ikrah fi din, there is no coercion in religion. It kind of guides what she's saying. Because she says, I have no right to tell you, a covered, veiled woman, I have no right to tell you not to veil. I can tell you why I think you shouldn't, but I have no right. But you also have no right to tell me to cover. One of the hadiths, important hadiths that had to be rejected was Anisa naqisat bil aql wad din. And translated into English, women are lacking in religion and reason. And she says, how can that be? And the argument that she makes for her rejection of this hadith that has been accepted as being directly from the Prophet Muhammad is whenever a prophetic tradition or a hadith contradicts the Quran, how can you go with the word and the action of a man, however exalted and important in our religion, when it contradicts God's word? So there was a huge reaction. The book, amazingly, I think it got more circulation than books like that get today. And as I said, many of the sheikhs, particularly the ones that she attacked, one of them even wrote, Al-Ghulayani, even wrote a book about her and said, oh, she didn't write it. There were some missionaries in Beirut, and they wrote it for her. So anyway, the problem for Nazira is it became so negative that when she married, her husband, and I spoke with her two sons a few years ago, forbade her from speaking publicly or writing anything. So more recently, we have Nawala Saadawi, who felt very strongly that the veil not only shrouds women's minds, but it attracts attention, men's attention to women's bodies. Because she said if women just dress ordinarily, I mean, if they like, they can wear pants, they can dress in a gender neutral way, then they're not going to attract attention. But if they are covered, it is, okay, there is something shameful about this body and it has to be covered. Throughout her life, her 90 years, Nawal claimed women's rights as human rights. So she did this long before the Beijing conference, when Hillary Clinton blew many people's minds when she said, women's rights are human rights. But that was Nawal's agenda from the start. She debated sheikhs publicly and cited the Quran. Cited the Quran in a way that many of them could not. And when they were shamed and could not respond to her citations of the Quran, then they started to condemn her as a heretic. So in 1992, she was put on the Islamists' death list. And she got in touch with me. I'd known her for a few years. And my wonderful dean at the time arranged for her to come to Duke, and where she stayed. We thought it was going to be 6 months, but she stayed for 4 years, where she wrote her memoir in 2.5 parts. I think the last half was not finished before she died, called Hayati Awraqi, My Life, My Papers. And she wrote there eloquently about the ways in which her understanding of Islam as a religion of peace and justice was what she had learned from her grandmother, a pious Muslim woman who wanted to make sure that her granddaughter, Nawal, knew that Islam was a religion of peace and justice. And just a little point here, I went with her to a conference in Rabat, and so it's 1996. She's still on the death list. She's sort of safe, I guess, here with me in Durham. And we're having lunch. Our conference was about women and Islam in Rabat. And then we're staying in a hotel where there's a bunch of men having lunch at the same time as we are. And she looks over and she says, oh, these are Muslim brothers. And, they're dressed very conventionally. And she then strides over to the table. I, of course, in the meantime, am very nervous. And she says, so what are you guys doing here? And they say, oh, there's a conference on Islam. And she said, oh, it's a conference just for men? No, there are women. So she says, where are the women? And they say, oh, in another hotel. She says, I want to speak to those women. And then she identifies somebody, her friend Ahmed, and she says, Ahmed, my old friend, from our Marxist days. So he's trying to hide from her, and they arrange for us to go to the other hotel where there is a conference room. So we walk in the following day. There must have been 200 women there, but on the podium or on the platform, there there were just men. There were 3 men. So the only men in the room were those who were sitting up there. They would be sitting next to us. And she then starts to talk to the women. The women ask some questions. She answers the questions. And then the chefs start to contradict her. And once again, she outsights them. And it becomes so heated that I had to drag her out. So I said to her, "Why did you do this? It was so dangerous." And she said, "Every time I'm in a situation like that, if only one person out of 200, 500, if only one person gets the message, it's worth it." So here you see her in her office in Shubra, and her life's work was to eliminate violence against women, especially when it was justified in Islamic terms. So the crucial issue, I mean, there were many crucial issues, but hijab doesn't get you killed or doesn't maim you for life, but female genital mutilation does. And her argument from 1972 until she died in 2021 was female genital mutilation is not Islamic, and it's destroying the lives of the girls who grow up into women who are crippled by what has happened to them. And she knew about that because she had trained as a physician. And when she went back to the main town in the region where she grew up, so she grew up in a village called Kafr Tahla, and Tahla was the town where she practiced as a doctor for several years after graduating from medical school. She had these girls coming to her, some bleeding to death from their vaginas or from the clitorises that had been cut. And she was determined that she was going to stop that. And one crucial thing that she did was in 1977 to write about her own experience. That was considered to be haram. Nobody wrote about their own. You could complain about it as a bad practice for girls and women, but you didn't write about your own experience. And that became a rallying cry for international campaigns against FGM that really took off in the 1990s. And then, importantly, in the late 80s, mid 80s, she established an organization called the Arab Women's Solidarity Association, AUSA. And in 1997, she had conferences every other year. The platform for the 97 conference was a platform for how Arab feminists should act and think politically. And so I just quote a short part from that platform. Solidarity between women and men. Note in the photograph that I have included below the young man, she always had men in these associations, and she was very, very concerned to give help and mentorship to young men. And her husband was her strongest supporter, and AUSA, the Arab Women's Solidarity Association, had many, many men in it. So solidarity between women and men in the Arab region and the reinforcement of the links between the cause of women and the struggles waged by Arab women for democracy, justice, human rights, and peace are necessary. So you see that here, this Islamic feminist, and many people are like, how can you call her an Islamic feminist? Anyway, I did. So that for her was crucial. It wasn't just about the Arab world. It wasn't just about Muslims. It was about the worldwide project for women's rights. So in 1987, the Moroccan sociologist Fatima Mernissi published her rather an exciting, almost incendiary book about prophetic traditions. It was called The Veil and the Melalit. And in this book, she takes on two of the companions of the prophet. So some of you may know who the companions were, some may not. So I'll just briefly say the companions were the people around the prophet who actually witnessed him do something or heard him say something that they then repeated. And these repetitions came down in a chain, an authoritative chain called an isnad. And if you could trace a tradition, a sound tradition, because there were many that weren't, but if you could trace a tradition back through the chain of authorities to Muhammad, it took on a vital role in Islamic jurisprudence. So what she said is in her project, and she's one of the people who started the term, the Prophet Muhammad is an Islamic feminist revolutionary. Where there is a tradition that is misogynistic, you have to look, not just as Nazira Zainuddin had said, if it's contradicted by the Quran, but let's look at who these men are. Okay, it's not enough to be a companion to Muhammad, that you're a good person. Maybe there's something wrong in who you are. Were you always considered to be truthful when you said that you had heard the Prophet Muhammad say something? So she takes on two companions whose traditions have passed down, have been authenticated as what we call sound traditions, sahih. And she says, well, let's look at Abu Huraira and let's look at Abu Bakr. Who were these guys? And what is so interesting is she can then point to the Prophet Muhammad's youngest wife, about whom I spoke at the beginning. She points to some of the traditions of Aisha, where she corrects either Abu Bakr or Abu Huraira and says, you know that my husband didn't say that. And then later, one of them talks about women aren't fit to be leaders, saying that Muhammad had said that during the Battle of the Camel. And so she just points out, you know, the Battle of the Camel was a number of years after Muhammad died. So this book does an amazing job pulling apart not only the hadith itself as not being prophetic, but as having been falsified, fabricated. So her message, so Fatima Mernissi's message is women must study Islam to know their rights. So she really, really wanted women to not only read the Quran and read the Hadith, that's quite a lot of reading, but she wanted them to go to institutions where they might study. And one can see that, in fact, she is recalling Nazira Zainuddin's arguments about the need to study the Quran. But unfortunately, Fatima Mernissi did not acknowledge Nazira Zainuddin. And in fact, it's really not been until about 15 years ago that Nazira Zainuddin has begun to really be understood as the pioneer of Islamic feminism that she was. So, moving into the 21st century, we have in America a dramatic situation. So 9/11, 2001, we have the destruction of the Twin Towers in New York, a huge wave of Islamophobia. Amani was talking about that earlier, the growth of Islamophobia. And so ironically, you'd have thought that maybe Muslim women who had not self-identified as Muslims, just thought they were, started to do something unusual, and that is to project themselves as Muslim women. And so I came up with this term in 2007, Muslim woman. So one single word, lowercase. And in it, I'm linking gender and religion as part of a strategic essentialist move that I'll talk about in a minute. But I think it's important to know, where did I come up with this term? And that is Sherman Jackson's Black American, where he links race and citizenship. And then womanist theologian Joan Martin's Black Woman, that links race and gender. So what I did was to link gender and religion. And so this was a remarkable move on the part of many Muslim women in America, but I think also in Europe and maybe elsewhere, that these Muslim women were performing a singular religious and gender identity, however different their lives, that would conform to Islamic rules in appearance, while working against those when they harm women. So this is sort of going back to the multiple critique. So there emerged, after the beginnings of Muslim women strategic essentialism, something that I have referred to as hijabi activism. And this has become a fairly persistent movement. And so it goes back to shortly after the Twin Towers and 9/11. So it's a movement that has appeared simultaneously, and I don't think joined together, in art, poetry, sports, and digital media. So Amani was talking about Muslim Girl. I think there was a magazine called Muslim Girl, which I'm sure she was involved in, where young women wanted to veil, they wanted to cover. And I was at a lunch, a Sunday lunch in Kuwait with my friend Layla Al-Uthman, who had been one of the activists against the hijab, like many women in the 20th century. And she said, "You've got to come for lunch because I want you to see my daughters. I've spent my life fighting against the hijab, and now we every time we meet, we have furious fights because they not only insist on covering themselves, but they want me to cover. They did not succeed. So what I saw in hijabi activism was the sense that these women, and most of them are young, that the hijab empowers and demands respect. Now, it's easy to say from the outside, oh, it's false consciousness. They don't know what they're doing. They think it's empowering, but in fact, they're just submitting to patriarchal control. And they're like, no, we're not. So I am hoping I can show you this. Ha, it worked. Is it loud enough? Yeah.
What the hair look like? Bet that hair look nice. Don't that make you sweat? Don't that feel too tight? Yo, what your hair look like? Bet your hair look nice. How long your hair is? You need to get your life. You only
Sorry, Dr. Miriam. I think it's locked on your PowerPoint, so we do not see the video.
Vacation, I'm bored with your fascination. I need that paper, paper, paper. If you want education. Hijabi ladies, we was born in the 80s, so pretty like the Euphrates.
Dr. Miriam, do you hear my voice?
Diplomas, current like some hot yoga, taking back the misnomers and teleporting through trauma, teleporting through trauma. Teleporting through trauma. I've been stacking my karma. Nefertiti, no drama. Make a feminist planet. Woman haters get banished. Covered up or not, don't ever take us for granted. All around the world, women and
For those of you who like that, you can watch the whole thing. And she also has a very powerful YouTube video called Dog. So I'll just leave it to you to go to it. And then I said hijabi activism appears also in sports. So the Emirati skater Zahara Lari insisted on covering her hair when she was participating in international competitions of skating. And not only did she finally persuade the administrators to let her cover her hair, but she and a number of other hijabi activists got Nike to design outfits for women to wear so they could cover their hair. Yeah, an interesting take on hijabi activism is, as you can see in this image, a burqa, something like that, certainly a niqab. So in his book on queer Muslims and empowered Muslim women, Michael Muhammad Knight writes Taqwa Course. That comes out in 2004. So you notice how all of this is really in a very narrow window, a kind of a revolution, a hijabi revolution. And one of the guys in Michael's novel called Taqwa Course talks about Imam Rabia, and she's in this picture. And so one of the guys says, she knew her stuff more than any of us and gave everything she had, every stupid second of her life to that Islam. So not only do we have women admiring Islamic feminism through a strategic essentialist appearance, but men also. So Moshe Kaf, who I had mentioned earlier, a year before Michael Knight's Tucker course, publishes in emails from Shahrazad a number of hijab scenes. And I will read this one to you. So you will note that she has a sardonic sense of humor. No, I'm not bald under the scarf. No, I'm not from that country where women can't drive cars. By the way, she's Syrian American, lives in Arkansas. No, I'm not from that country where women can't drive cars. No, I would not like to defect. I'm already American, but thank you for offering. What else do you need to know relevant to my buying insurance, opening a bank account, reserving a seat on a flight? Yes, I speak English. Yes, I carry explosives. They're called words. And if you don't get up off your assumptions, they're going to blow you away. So in 2012, a Saudi woman, here she is, took part in a competition that took place in the Gulf, and it was called Sha'ir al-Milyon, the million poet, because the poet who won this competition in arcane Arabic, the Arabic of pre-oil Gulf and Saudi Arabia, whoever won that competition would get $1 million. So here she is reciting her poem. It didn't get her the first prize, but it did get an honorable mention. And so here she is in, actually she doesn't win, she got honorable mention. And she writes, I saw evil stalking from the eyes over their fatwas. Remember Damascus, 1927? In an era when they contaminated the permitted with the forbidden, I have uncovered the face of the truth, revealing the monster hidden behind the mask. A savage, resentful, barbaric, blinded man, wearing a cloak of death under a tightened belt, howling and terrifying the populace through brutal politics, preying on every soul yearning for peace. The one who speaks freely is disgraced. So in conclusion, I have identified, I think, 6 ways of thinking about Islamic feminist political thought. And these strands, these 6 strands, braid together resistances to local, national, religious, and sexual discriminations. First, understand how mandatory veiling and gender segregation jeopardize social well-being. Next, study texts, scriptures, constitutions, to have the credentials to challenge. And that was the Fatima Mernis's point. You have to have the credentials, like Nawal Saadawi had, to be able to challenge misogynist interpretation. And you have to have at your fingertips relevant passages. 3, advertise the price that society pays for physical and epistemic violence against Muslim women. 4, establish organizations like OSA, the Arab Women's Solidarity Association, establish organizations to coordinate strategies to combat intersectional discriminations. 5, contest self-appointed authorities who impose un-Islamic controls on women. And finally, importantly, demand respect for women's right to live in dignity and as they wish, even if that includes veiling. Thank you. I hear nothing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miriam.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we hear.
Beautiful. Wow. Well, what a powerful start to our program. Thank you so much, Dr. Miriam, for guiding us through such a rich and layered history. And, I think that your entire course has reminded all of us that Islamic feminism, as we know it today, it's not a monolith, of course, but it's a living, evolving movement. It's rooted in our diverse realities and experiences from all walks of life. And it's exciting to contextualize that we are all, walking in this history of women and kind of carrying that torch as the next generation. So now we get to a really fun part of our class today, and we're going to be doing this for each one of our lectures. Guys, I'm at Oxford right now, and the UK sun, it's just unmatched. So if it keeps changing the lighting on you, please bear with me here. But here's what we're going to do. And this is what I would like for us to do throughout this week, throughout the course. We are going to be dedicating, a good chunk of time, like 15 minutes or so, depending on when our lecturers complete their talks, to a Q&A. I am going to be eager and delighted to share some of the questions that I have prepared for our speakers and to guide and facilitate the discussion. But I would also love for this to be a collective discussion amongst all of us as a class, as a course. So, as we continue on this conversation, please do not hesitate to share your thoughts in the chat, which I know some of you have been doing throughout the talk. Really appreciate you doing that. And I'm going to be monitoring the chat as well. So when relevant questions come up, I will do my best to integrate them. Dr. Miriam, you covered such a wide array of topics, in your presentation. Since you are the lecturer that we have specifically focusing on the history of Islamic feminism, I kind of want to take advantage of the opportunity to ask you some questions that are specifically related to Islamic history. And a few that I think are relevant to today. And of course, this is also selfishly motivated by myself to get some answers that I'm interested in as well. The first one is that you mentioned my personal icon, Khadija radiallahu anha. She is somebody that I think even in today's definition is a powerful woman and a great example for all of us in terms of her leadership and her status in society and, her commitments. Interestingly enough, I do think that Khadija has become a lightning rod kind of symbol for today's generation of Muslim men and their relationship with women, right?
Really?
Sorry?
Really? I'm interested. Can I ask you
Yes.
why?
Yes, I think that, Khadija has been collectively, regarded by all of us as an example. And even the love story between her and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was kind of made to be an example for us, right? That she was a powerful woman. She was a businesswoman. She was a tribal leader. She was financially well off. She took the initiative to propose herself to a man, which even today is something that women fear, and she also was his biggest supporter. And the first Muslim, in Prophet Muhammad's time, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was a woman. It was his wife. So, and also she was older than him. I have a video that I would like to share with you, which is the reason why I believe that she is a lightning rod. So let me share my screen really quick. It's on the same tab, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to. Let's see. And this video. I don't think it's gonna let me. So here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and share it in the chat as a link, as I did with the video that you were playing for those that weren't able to access it. Where are we right now? Let me resend it. Okay, I will just describe the video. I will follow up with you guys to send it when we follow up, to send you all the resources and the presentations here. But basically, it's some TikTokers. I would like to label them as Wallah Bros. In Muslim Girl, we have what we call Wallah Bros, which is our version of the male misogynists, the ones that speak to their own perspective of Islam and then look at each other and go, Wallahi, bro, as if that's the end all be all. So these are Wallah Bros. And so we have this TikTok made by a couple of Wallah Bros that are kind of popular influencers online. And it was made during Ramadan, and they're walking out of a khutbah or something during Ramadan, and they're going, oh my God, you guys, we just discovered that Khadija radiallahu anha wasn't in her 40s when she married the Prophet. She was actually like 20 something. Oh my God, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. And they're all overjoyed at this. And obviously it was extremely controversial and obviously very misogynistic, because first of all, none of these men could ever attract a woman as powerful as Khadija radiallahu anha. But on top of that, you know, what I mean by her being a lightning rod is that men tend to try to reinterpret her story, you know, or question the factual accuracies of the story in order to support a narrative that they want to have about the relationship with women. You know, Islam has obviously been extremely progressive and empowering for us through the example of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and Khadija. And they are trying, in my opinion, trying to kind of twist things to fit it into this box of what is becoming a popular red pill culture, the Andrew Tate ideology of it all. And so I'm wondering if you might be able to speak to that, right? Maybe if you would like to kind of speak a little bit more about Khadija radiallahu anha as an example for us, but also how that story kind of pushes back on this mainstream misogyny that has kind of taken shape and really taken off and running in terms of its popularity, especially amongst Muslim men, which is quite, you know, quite disappointing.
I'm not sure I can add much because I guess I just know the traditional story and, you know, from the Sirah. So
so was she in fact significantly older than Prophet Muhammad
sallallahu
alaihi wasallam? Was she better financially off?
40. She was 40. He was 25. He led her caravans of merchandise up to Syria and back. Yeah, when he came back from, you know, Hira, from the cave, when he heard the angel Gabriel delivering God's message, she comforted him. I mean, that's what's in the Sirah, that, you know, he was trembling with fear because he was afraid that, as I mentioned, he was afraid that somehow he'd gone crazy, you know, that he was hallucinating.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he comes back again, and it's the same story, she's like, no, you really, really have heard the word, and you must create and lead a community of believers in the word that Allah has asked you to distribute to the world.
Thank you so much for that. I think for me, my personal motivation here is to collect some ammo to hold against the Wallah Bros when the opportunity arises. So.
Well, actually, okay, some ammo. How about Macron's wife?
Okay.
Isn't she like 20 years older than him, and nobody has a problem with that?
That is so true. We have so many examples like that, I think, in today. We actually have a really interesting question from Sanjita. She wants to know if you could possibly enlighten us in what ways you think that Islamic feminism and Muslim feminism differ epistemologically in their approaches to knowledge production, interpretive methodologies within Islamic thought, and their authority.
Great question. And yeah, I was going to go into it in the talk, but it's much better as an answer. Yeah, the argument that I make in Women Claim Islam is that there's, if you like, there's almost a spectrum. And so the spectrum is from Muslim as identity to Islamist as being, you know, radical political version of Islam, and Islamic is somewhere in between. But as I mentioned, I'm not talking about an identity. I'm talking about the place from where anyone talks, and the way we talk is mandated by the people we're talking with, right? So that was the Zainab al-Ghazali thing in her prison memoir, where she says, you know, I was much stronger in Turra prison. That was a men's prison, very fierce place. I was much stronger than the men. They tried to drown me. They tried to put the dogs on me. They couldn't touch my body. And so she creates her body, her woman's body, as somehow sacred. And then she talks about 7 levels, and I interpret that as the opposite of the Mi'raj. Okay, so she talks about diving down into the hell of the prison and coming out as this sacred body. So in that instance, somebody that anybody would have said was an Islamist, because she was very much part of the Muslim Brother agenda in many ways. There, she's an Islamic feminist. But then, you know, we have the tafsir, and I've already explained it. Now, what for me was crucial at the time of writing Women Claim Islam was the emergence of Muslim feminists who announced through their own experience that Islam is misogynistic. Islam is inherently an anti-women religion. And there were many examples of it. Oh my God. Yeah, all the names are out. And, well, there was reading Lolita in Tehran. And then there was, I mean, there were a couple of women who became really famous who said, look, I'm Muslim and I'm a feminist, and I can tell you from my own experience that Islam is anti-women. Women's rights just don't fit into it. And there was a book where, I'm sorry, the name, I can get them in a minute, where the author starts off saying, I'm, you know, I'm dealing with Islamic fundamentalism, but then very soon in the book, she drops fundamentalism and becomes Islam. So the premise in the beginning is Islamic fundamentalism, as we know it today, is against women, but in fact, it is Islam that's anti-women. So to be a Muslim feminist is for that to be your birth identity, as I said, Christian, something you put on in your passport, but it is not a faith-based position from which you argue for women's rights, not just for yourself, but for everyone. Amani, I lost you. Have we all lost Amani? Oh no, maybe coming back. I'm seeing all your faces, but I don't see Amani.
Yes, maybe she has some problem in connection.
Okay.
So we just can continue with the question of the participants. If anyone would like to ask any questions, so she or he can turn on her or his microphone and ask the question until Amani is back. Yes, please, Zahra, go on.
Hi. I just have a quick question. I wanted to know, I'm not like, I think most of the people here are studying Islamic feminism. I'm not from a scholarly background of Islamic feminism, so maybe I sound very ignorant in this regard. I just want to know, what is the role of men in Islamic feminism? Um, I would argue that, from my own experience, that not all men are oppressive or against the rise of women. And so, does Islamic feminism work in partnership with men who support, like the liberation and the equality of women? And I just want to ask you, maybe this is maybe an ignorant question, but for example, when Malala Yousafzai is very famous, and in her narrative, I would argue that her father played a very important role in her beliefs about education for women. Yet as far as what I've read, I don't know, maybe it's not complete. It's probably not complete, but Malala's father is hardly mentioned in 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 her life story and in her educational advancement. So I just wanted to know, what is the role of men in Islamic feminism? Thank you.
Good question. That's why, of course, when I was talking about Noel Saadawi and her campaigns against, for the elimination of violence against women, she insisted that it is all about men and women together. And I did not read to you the background to, for example, Taimuriya's autobiography, where she says it's her mother who is preventing her from being educated. And many feminists talk about their fathers as being the ones who have supported them. Noel is clear that it was her grandmother and her father who were her strongest supporters. It was really, really important. He was highly educated. I think he was educational supervisor in the Kahla region. No, Islamic feminism is definitely not against women, against men. No, it is an agenda for men and women having the same rights in all spheres. And that doesn't mean that they're asking for equality, because equality has been said so often. Equality isn't possible between us. I mean, my husband and I will not be equal, but we can have equal rights. So, yeah. And it's important also that these equal rights not be thought of as complementary rights. So many authorities say, oh, women are more important than men because look what they do. And I mean, they can't be bankers and they can't be leaders and they can't be this and that, but they're better than us. And that's called complementarity, right? Women complete men, but they complete all the invisible domestic stuff. So, no, Islamic feminists that I have read and whom I know feel very strongly that men must be part of the movement.
Thank you, Dr. Miriam. Can you all hear me?
Yes, welcome back.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for your patience. Zoom kicked me out a little while ago, but we are at time for this session. So with that being said, I would like to ask our esteemed lecturer today one final closing question. It's a question that I'm going to be posing to all of our guest lecturers this week. Dr. Miriam, if you could share one message directly with the next generation of Muslim women activists and scholars, what would it be?
I would say that learning about women's rights in Islam is absolutely the first step to then doing the next step, and that is either alone or preferably with others to organize against the twisting, the misogynistic twisting of Islamic teachings. So, and I think organizing is really important. So you said you published Muslim Girl. That was a magazine, wasn't it?
Yes, its predecessor was a magazine, but no relation.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that was full of organizations for pulling for women to come together. And that's also I talk about, and that is that these organizations don't have to have always an unchanging project. People should be able to bring together participants in a movement. Well, that was interesting. You're upside down.
Oh no. There we go.
Yeah, so
Is that better
anyway,
now?
maybe the technology is telling us it's time.
Am I still upside down?
No, you're right way up now.
Okay, perfect. Dr. Miriam, that was a brilliant response. And to be honest, we could have continued this discussion for another 2 hours after this. You received many more questions in the chat, and I regret that we do have to conclude our very first lecture for the day, or for the week. But I'm so delighted that you kicked us off on such a strong note. And I do want to encourage everyone, all of our students here, even if we didn't get to your question, please do make a note of it and save it for this week, because some of the questions that you did share in the chat, we will be having lectures that actually delve even deeper into those specific topics. So you will have an opportunity to hopefully answer those questions and even ask additional ones to elaborate further on them. But for now, I hope you'll all join me in thanking Dr. Miriam for guiding us through this history. And to all of us, to all of the students here, I hope the first session really helped kick off a deeper sense of this incredible journey that we all share with Islamic feminism, and kind of sets the tone for where we're taking it for this week. And as we do move into the rest of this week and the rest of our lectures, I hope that we do carry forward some of these critical questions that we started exploring today, to continue to building on them. And for those that have the program tomorrow, we look forward to delving into reinterpretations of the Quran on women's issues with Dr. Asma of Sadra, who will be continuing on the discussion that Dr. Miriam set for us today. So thank you all so much for your presence, for your curiosity, for your commitment. I cannot wait for the inspiring conversations that we're going to be having today. And Dr. Miriam, thank you so much for dignifying us with your talk.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Miriam.
Bye.
Forgive me, could I ask a question?
Okay.
You said you at one point worked alongside Nawal al-Saadawi. Um, do you have do you know anything, or do you have anything you could share about her writing the book Woman at Point Zero?
I wrote
Um,
the introduction to it.
oh,
So you'll see.
okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And she was with me here in Durham, North Carolina, for 4 years. So we
Okay.
were very, very close.
Thank you so much.
You're
Jazakallah
welcome.
khair.